F1 under me would be just a Fleetwood Mac engine fest, of course. They have this freewheeling issue, which is something I've driven me some race cars, and I'd never heard of that in my life. Don't get me wrong, you only need to take one look at Fernando Alonso's career to know that it doesn't always go right. It's like everybody's fault. It's not a nobody's fault thing, it's an everybody's fault thing. I think that the drivers are entitled to say whatever they want to say in perpetuity about the series, and the series are perfectly entitled to ignore them and run it exactly how they want. Omni fuck, basically, of just nightmare. And all of our conversations seem to circle back round to WWE at some point. Whenever the sport as a whole has not listened to the drivers as a group, it's gone very badly. You guys are very spicy this evening. It's Alex, regulations wrong, yes or no? Vowels out, yes or no?
That's right.
It's red flags.
What's up, bankers?
Hello, bankers.
How is everybody doing?
How are you doing? I hope you're doing good. I hope you're all waiting in anticipation about what the FIA and F1 is going to do with these regs, because they had a meeting yesterday and we were hoping to get a lot of information. But baby, this wouldn't be Formula One if they were transparent. Absolutely not. This is a maze with mirrors, and you don't know what up is up and down is down. But luckily, we have an expert on the pod today to make sense of what's going on in the Formula One world, from Max Verstappen maybe retiring to GP leaving Red Bull for McLaren and everything that's going on with these new regulations. Today on the pod, we have a racer, a pundit, and he knew that Oscar Piastri was going to have a start from the gods in Suzuka. He called his shot. Matt doubted him, and I said, never doubt a Brundle. We have F1 TV commentator in front of the pod, Alex Brundle, on the pod today.
Pleasure to see you guys. Good to be back. I said that Oscar Piastri information on literally every show. So when he got off the line, I was like, yes. I was like, I really went in big, didn't I, on Oscar getting a good start, and he did. So that was good.
Well, yeah, you were like, Oscar's having these great practice starts. I'm like, is it a slow news day? Does he not have a lot of information? Because that seems really thin. And then I was like, fuck me, I guess. That was an amazing call.
There we go. I tried it. I also said on Instagram before the race went live that we would have a Ferrari and McLaren 1-2 into the first corner, which I was also pretty proud of. But, they're not wild takes, are they? Because we know how bad the Mercedes has been off the line throughout the year so far. So, you got to take the wins when you can get them in this game, especially when I'm going to come on the podcast with no more information than you about what the FIA said yesterday. So
that's right.
But clearly you're good at speculating. So we're going to obviously have you speculate about Max and GP and the FIA regulations. But first, we got to talk about this GP business. At first, when GP left, we're like, oh, is this an indication that maybe Max is even further out the door? But now I've been reading and listening, and is it actually more of an indication that he already knows Max is leaving? Because I've read things that like he stayed on longer than he could have stayed on for Max, and maybe he's jumping before Max leaves. What do you think? What do you think of the narrative of GP as it relates to Max? I guess is my question.
Well, there is a quote, isn't there, that bounced around the airwaves that is reasonably old, actually, where Max says, I will always work with GP. As soon as GP leaves, I'll stop. I think it's an old enough quote that he might reverse out of that one if he chooses to, alongside the one that says, I'll race for Red Bull forever and so on and so forth. Like these things get sort of like subtly binned, forgotten. I think, for example, Lando Norris liked, hated, and then re-liked and then re-hated the F1 regulations race by race throughout the beginning of this season. So you know what I mean? It's one of these things. The first thing that strikes me is that's a long time into the future that is actually that actually takes effect, right? So that's 2028. So GP now has 20, the rest of the 26 and potentially the 27 season, if he indeed, continues to work directly for Red Bull before moving across to McLaren. Sort of in the knowledge that he's going to go over there. As to how it relates to Max, I mean, that's pure speculation, isn't it? We know what Max has said about how he feels about this regulation set. And I think that's built of just looking forward into many years of potential engine regulation where he knows that Mercedes are going to have the upper hand. And, if he's going to stay with Red Bull, it's going to be tough, right?
Right. And he hates the ethos of the regulations as well, which is a whole other ball game. I'm curious what your thoughts are. As is being laid out right now, GP is going to be there through the 2027 season and then hop over to McLaren sometime in 2028. Unclear what the gardening leave, situation will be over there. Do you think Red Bull keeps him in that same position for that entire time, or will there be a kind of rolling him back situation at Red Bull in terms of them not wanting to have certain information when he hops over to McLaren?
That is a really interesting judgment call from Laurent Mekies, isn't it? Because you look at it, and I think it's going to depend on the relative performance of the two teams at the time. Your inner racer says that come the end of this season, Laurent might say, you know what, we're going to find to as much for continuity. If Max does stay on, as much for continuity with Max as anything else, you've got to get him building with a new engineer. And I'm not sure that having an engineer that everyone in the team knows is leaving, even if GP is absolutely upstanding, as these guys so often are, with the information that he's controlling from Red Bull, that then is not supposed to go across from McLaren. The team need to be able to operate totally freely with him throughout the 2027 season. So I wonder if at the end of this year they will then say to him, "Hey, we need to start building. We need to start building someone new with Max." Fascinating, and it's going to depend on the internal relationship and the performance of the two cars as well. Red Bull could easily think, well, if the McLaren's up the road, then we've not got a huge amount to lose by them knowing much information about our car. So
right, it's interesting because when Lewis said he was moving to Ferrari and that got leaked kind of earlier, there was lots of rumblings how Mercedes started closing him out of meetings, and George it got more information than Lewis because they didn't want him bringing it over to Ferrari. And I guess that might start happening to GP, and it might impact his job as a race engineer to Max. But
the flip side of the argument is, he's a championship winning race engineer. So there's a certain, it depends whether you consider it as a network or you consider it as a resource. As a resource, there is no point in squandering that resource if, the information that might leave the team is not necessarily mission critical, or your opponents already have it. It's going to depend a lot on how it goes through the rest of the year. So I'm interested to see that. One thing I do think is that if that kind of thing does happen at Red Bull, then you'll know about it immediately, because Max is just the kind of driver who will tell that exactly how it is.
Beyond his skills as a race engineer, he's also has the interpersonal skills of being one of the only people in the world that Max Verstappen really respects, because Max Verstappen has a high bar in terms of who earns that respect on his part. I'm curious, Red Bull's now lost a bunch of people, since their days, 2023, when they're, dominating the world. They seem completely untouchable. Obviously, Christian Horner's gone. Now Helmut's gone. Rob Marshall's at McLaren. Will Courtney's at McLaren. Jonathan Wheatley's at Audi. Now he's unemployed. He's probably going to Aston Martin. And now the latest, GP leaving the squad. What do you make of all of this? And I mean, obviously, Dietrich's death and the fallout of that seems to be a huge contributing factor to this. But I guess I'm looking at a guy like GP leaving, And I think to myself, how do they not make him happy or give him some type of promotion to keep him at Red Bull? How do they keep losing people to these other teams? Why are they not giving their own people enough to keep them there?
I mean, it's not so much the nature of like traditional employment, though, is it? You know, so you look at another firm, another company, and you think, well, those people have left, and you know they must not have enjoyed their terms, or they must not have, like, you're dealing with a group of people who are driven, incredibly competitive, can be, you know, completely happy with the way that, you know, their job role plays out day to day, but are simply in pursuit of a scenario where they have the opportunity to win again. And, you know, winning is addictive, like so addictive, you know, and, you know, when you look at the kind of commitment, you know, particularly engineers who, you know, don't get to drive the car, don't do all of the travel, do, you know, I mean, it's a dream job, don't get me wrong, but it takes years of commitment, and these are incredibly learned and high performing people. They're not just doing this for the money, right? They're doing this to try and win, and it's I think it will literally have come down to, you know, GP looking at the marketplace, contract in the balance, and that's the way that Formula One has always been. You look at, for example, you know, the ultimate example, Hamilton at Mercedes. It looks like an unbreakable, never-ending kind of continuation into the future of the way that team's going to successfully go. Then all of a sudden, boom, he's in red, and that can happen with the engineering personnel too, because they're chasing success.
Or are they chasing I mean, like, well, Lewis made a miscalculation there if he wanted the success. Yeah. I mean, but Ferrari has that lure, but as I think does McLaren. McLaren maybe has a little bit of that pull as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not saying it always goes right.
Yeah,
don't get me wrong. I mean, you only need to take one look at Fernando Alonso's career to know that it doesn't always go right. Sure. But yeah, it's, you know, you're looking at World Constructors champions with the right engine contract in the moment, you know, and but the opportunity to grow and develop a car. There's a lot to be said for the fact that, you know, potentially Mercedes might not work for historical and political reasons, if, you know, as it might not have worked for Max for the same reasons. So you look up and down and you think you are, you know, a championship winning race engineer. You've got the opportunity to go to McLaren, and he's gone. I mean, what is interesting, and I think the really interesting point about it, is that the relationship with Max has not kept him there in perpetuity. And the question to be answered is that because Max is not staying there in perpetuity, or is that just because GP is doing his own thing?
And can you speak to, as a driver, can you speak to the particular importance, because I know there is a particular importance between a driver specifically and his race engineer, because I know it's a special relationship?
I mean, all of your engineers will describe themselves as part psychologist, and I think that's the jump that it takes from being a performance engineer of a certain part of the car, right? So that's the transit for these engineers. They start off by running like a certain element of the car, like the brakes or something like that, and then they'll move through. And all of the engineers you talk to will suddenly become the race engineer for a driver and go, oh my God, like, I knew every single facet of this racing car that we're running, but what I didn't realize is I am now this guy's I am now just this guy's psychologist, basically, for the whole weekend, because so much of it is about then the engagement between driver and the car. And we know with Max that GP is brilliant, and I always think he's most brilliant at keeping him on task, you know, and not allowing his mind to escape into other directions of how the race is going, how the last pit stop was, the politics surrounding. And if we hear that going on in the race car. Can you imagine how much of that goes on for the rest of the weekend? We get like, the tip of the iceberg of that relationship. They're not even speaking freely, and they're aware that the whole team and potentially the world can hear them in that moment. You imagine how much private mind management goes on between GP and Max?
I never thought of it that way, because it's pretty spicy in public, so it must get pretty spicy privately.
Well, those are the charged moments. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But in the meetings, like if this you can imagine a scenario where GP is going, if this happens, Max, we need to stay focused. And don't get me wrong, that's not because Max is some kind of unable to focus. Quite clearly not. All of the engineers are doing that, but GP just appears to have the code.
There's this other pundit out there, I think his name is Martin Brundle. And he said, he basically was saying something to the effect of, Max has got a shit or get off the pot, right? Do you agree with this pundit? Yes or no?
No, I don't. I think that the drivers are entitled to say whatever they want to say in perpetuity about the series, and the series are perfectly entitled to ignore them and run it exactly how they want. But I think that I'm happy with the drivers. I'm happy with the drivers telling us what they think about the way that they're going racing. As long as the drivers accept that there's more than just them in the environment of motorsport. You're looking at the fans, you're looking at the stakeholders, you're looking at everyone involved. But Max can say what he wants.
Of course, Brian and I were talking about this the other day, and maybe this is to some degree. I can't speak for this one pundit. Maybe you could speak more. You might know him a little bit better. But what Brian and I were discussing was, from a team morale standpoint, from you're bleeding talent every 30 seconds. GP's leaving, Rob Marshall's leaving, when you're losing all your figureheads, you're losing all the identity of the team is just washing away, whether it's Dietrich, Helmut, Christian, Rob Marshall, whoever. And really the only guy who's left at this point, the real face of the franchise, is Max Verstappen. And when that guy is like, I don't know, but I don't know. I could go, I could stay. Fuck this, fuck that. I mean, yes, he has every right to do that, but in terms of what's in his best interest, does that have a knock-on effect with his head mechanic, with his front jackman, with when I have to get up every day with a bad back and lift his car up and check underneath to see if his brakes are that's what I'm saying. Is it actually in his best interest at that point?
Well, no, I don't think so. It's not great. It's not great for team morale, is it? When the lead driver comes in and says, I hate the car I'm racing. Right. There are a couple of things I'd say. First thing is he's definitely not alone up and down the pit lane. A lot of drivers have a lot of stuff to say. The other thing is you don't know what he's like in private as well. Right. And these drivers all, the drivers and inside the teams all kind of, have this sense that the media are just doing what they do. It's very much an agreement between the team and the driver, even, in sports car racing, even at a level which doesn't have the media scrutiny, that when the media come out and say stuff about you, that you recognize that they are a tool to be used and that they are always going to have something to say because that's their job. So not to say that, it's massively beneficial for the team morale when Max comes out and says, I hate these new regulations, particularly when the car is not going well. But we don't know that he's not rectifying that in the background with the team that he's working with.
Right.
Yeah, he's certainly shown an ability to kind of have his people work very hard for him because they know that he's going to give it his all.
In the end, one thing matters, which is you look across the garage and you are the benchmark in the car which the team have produced, right? And it's closer now for Max than ever. And I think that, Formula One is a very tough world. It's a very performance focused world. And, you talk to the old guard, as much as not everybody has a huge amount of time for everything he has to say, you're the Helmut Markos of this world, even as far back as sort of the Ron Dennises of this world. And they go, the driver can yap away and say whatever he wants. I just want him to drive the fastest in the car that we've produced. And if he does that, I'm going to congratulate him and send him home with a check. That's it.
Gotcha. He's got the one job. Okay, let's discuss these regs. The drivers up and down are not happy. At certain points, Lando Norris was happy with him, and then hated. You mentioned that earlier. The Ferraris seem to be not quite as irate. The Mercedes guys don't seem to be, waving any intense flags as some of the guys further back. But there is a consensus that, something needs to change. They met yesterday because we're recording this on Friday. We might have more information by the time this episode comes out, but that's, for context. It was a meeting to have another meeting to potentially change these regs. Before we get into what they're going to change, I'm just curious your thoughts on the regulations and kind of the schools of thought coming out of them that many of the drivers and many people are saying that they are just fundamentally against the ethos of what Formula One should be.
Talking as a guy with a shed full of carbureted V8s, which I am, right? I don't think they are, as a driver and as a motorsport purist and a motorsport passionate, I don't think they are your absolute dream regulations, right? At 8 years old, when I jumped in a go-kart, was I dreaming to drive... Well, such a thing didn't exist then, but was I dreaming to drive a 50-50 electrified Formula One car? Yeah. No, I wasn't. The reality is that the business has stakeholders, right? And some of those stakeholders wanted that thing. That's the pretext of what we need to accept as a group, is that those stakeholders wanted that thing. I'm talking about Audi. I'm talking about Ford coming in. I'm talking about Mercedes producing engines and cars, right? As a group of regulations so far, I think nobody's happy with qualifying. I think that a Formula One car, and I think the paddock, as I believe Andrea Stella said this week, the paddock are aligned that a Formula One car should be in one of two states in qualifying. It should either be on the limit of grip or delivering all of the power to the road that it has, right? So that's thing number one. And I think that pretty much everyone's aligned on that and is going to, I'm sure, be one of the focuses of this group of regulation tweaks, regulation changes. I, with the guilty pleasure of a purist, quite enjoy watching the racing, I'll be honest. I like the cars passing each other until I hear from the drivers who stand next to me that they lack control of when the power comes in and when the power cuts out, which I think is something that needs addressing as well. Our job as pundits is to explain to the audience what's going on, right? And try to help the audience understand what's going on. Whatever that is, it's super easy to go, I hate everything, and stand on and gain massive sort of hits on various social media accounts by saying you hate everything. That's not my job. My job is to purely explain it for what it is. But that's what I think of these regulations.
So you're actually, I think we can all agree that Saturday is flawed and then Sunday is a bit mixed. I could say that a lot of people think Sundays are better. A lot of people think Sundays are worse. But from a pundit standpoint, from an analyst standpoint, I know I personally, from a fan standpoint, the part of the challenge is struggling to understand what's happening with the battery, with the super clipping, with the charging, and also like is this a real pass? Is the other guy just dead on arrival and he's going to get him later? How much of, like you said, is driver's skill? How much of this is machine learning? Just the systems working? Like how much of the battery deployment is actually like, because I mean, is battery deployment, is saving your battery really the racing purity? No, but it could be a driver's skill, right? Who can muster the battery, but then you start hearing that it's automated and you're like, so what the fuck are we doing here?
So F1 has had an element of battery saving and deployment for the last sequence of years.
Yeah.
When a driver in previous, years got a tow, for example, like a lot of that would be saving battery, and delivering that battery all at once. It's just so much more dominant in the way that the racing works now. The cars are passing each other. There's clearly a certain skill to it, and when the drivers stand next to me, they are. I mean, I believe I said it on air. On F1 TV, they have worked, they are brain fried from going through this information. And further, I've raced against cars in sports car racing that have that automated sail mode technology for absolutely years. I mean, sports cars in 2014, the works Audi in 2014 did that. It'd come by you and just run out of juice next to you, and everybody just handled it. In sprint racing, it's a totally different thing. I think that you've got to have, and something I do agree with that other pundit you noted earlier on about, is that drivers drive racing cars alone and unaided. And in a modern world, I do think that includes artificial intelligence doing a huge amount of the work, definitely deciding when the overtakes are occurring, right? So I'm not. There are stakeholders who've been promised a 50-50 electrified Formula One. That much is clear for all to see. It's a case of there is a way that works for the viewer and for the drivers. We've got to try and find a solution where it works for all parties.
Do you think that, if it seems to me, it seems to us that Formula One is kind of in new territory with regards to the power dynamics, because for a very long time, the stakeholders and big business were kind of the entire bread and butter of how Formula One worked. Most of these teams were losing money, organizations. Teams would drop like flies. It was so expensive to run a team. You couldn't make your money back. It was purely for the love of the sport. The way that they made their money was through the big manufacturers and through big business. Now, with the new age fandom and teams being potentially more profitable because of the fans, there's a new player in town. And these guys are now more famous than they ever have been, and have these huge platforms where they can just directly tell people what they feel in 1 second on an Instagram story. Today sucked. Fuck these regulations. Fuck the FIA, or whatever it might be. Do you think that Formula One's really is that something they're struggling with this thing? Because it does feel like they did this to make Audi happy. They did this to make the big manufacturers happy. But if you're going to lose the new fans, are you, cutting off your nose to spite
and
your
the
face?
old fans?
And the old fans. I mean, it seems like everyone's, in terms of the fan, like old heads are hating this, and new fans, we talk about this, like a lot of our friends are trying to get into the sport. If you're a new fan trying to get into the sport and you walk in and it's not a sport, it's a bunch of people screaming at each other, you're like, I'm not watching this year. Like I'll tune back in, or maybe I'll never tune back in, but I'll tune back in when like you guys sort this shit out.
At the end of the day, the viewer is king, right? And that's never changed. That's never changed, because there's only one person in charge of Audi, and there's an incredibly famous saying in the motor trade, which is the customer is always right. And essentially you are selling cars to the customer. I think that you've got to remember that there's actually a tremendous lead time on generating these regulations. I mean, yes, they're now and also there were tweaks built in originally, right? So when you read through the technical regulations that are publicly available, when these regulations were pitched and from the very beginning, there's a big raft of like, we can change this if it's not right built in. But you're looking at a lead time of developing this stuff, which goes back into a past where all of these technologies, and you sit there in a boardroom a little while ago and think, okay, that might be the sort of thing that we want out of an international motorsport championship. Let's say 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years into the future, then it actually plays out and occurs. All of a sudden, the customer either does like it, doesn't like it, or somewhere in between, and you have to react. And I think that that's what's happening now with these meetings, as well as probably the overarching point, which is the safety point, and that's one thing. And if there's one single thing which I think has led to that meeting more than anything else, I think it was, Behrman's incident in Suzuka, because there's one thing that they won't compromise, and that's safety. So, this other, what Brian was talking about is what the shareholders and this insistence on road relevance. These things have to be road relevant. They have to be technology relevant to what we're seeing on the road. Are we reaching a tipping point, though, where F1 is not going to be able to be road relevant? Because if you actually want to be road relevant, I mean, look at in 20 years, are we even going to have drivers anymore? Yeah,
because everything's going automated. Like,
right,
if you're just like fixated on road relevance, then like pretty soon there shouldn't be any more drivers. We should just be racing fucking AI machines, and whoever has the fastest AI machine is the best. And it'll be fucking GP standing on the podium collecting his trophy for setting up the best AI machine, right?
I've seen an automated
because if you
car
take this to its logical conclusion, you're not going to like what you're going to see, because at some point F1 might have to be the Kentucky Derby. Like, oh, isn't this a quaint thing? We have drivers in cars. Isn't that sweet?
Look, I've seen an AI, an artificial intelligence powered racing car in Abu Dhabi dive bomb up the inside of another artificial intelligence powered racing car and take a position away. That happened in real time last year. So yeah. I mean, and all of our conversations seem to circle back round to WWE at some point.
Yes,
but we need to accept the reality of that. For me, Formula One has always been about any business, not just from a corporate standpoint, has always been about any business. If it's Renault or if it's Red Bull, I don't care. Going, look at this incredible and interesting machine that we can create to entertain you. Now, I think that the audience are intelligent enough to work out that if, the business can create that, they can create something else that doesn't necessarily have to be like exactly the same thing, right? If Mercedes can generate this amazing Formula One car, which can win races up against all of the other great manufacturers of the world, and can corner and can perform over the Grand Prix distance, their C class doesn't have to be exactly the same to still benefit from their core competence, right? And I see that as the way that the sport will eventually go. Yes, and I do believe that pure road relevance is a little bit of a detour to really having a scenario where Formula One will always be technological. There is no escape from that. It's never going to be like hyper karting, much as I want it to be. But I think that it will move away from like, Renault, there's a Renault, this car is like the Renault that you can buy on the street. That messaging will eventually leave into the sort of midterm and definitely into the long-term future. Yeah.
Okay. That I think that's a hopeful. I mean, that gives me hope. I think that like we have talked about that the road relevance thing. You know, you see Mercedes winning. You say, I want to buy a Mercedes. You know, when Red Bull was winning with the Honda engine, I thought to myself, I want a Honda. Not because I think that the engine that's in Honda, but I just know that they're competent in this arena. I might as well, like, I should have their car in this other arena. Do I really care, especially as consumers are getting more and more just kind of like, oh, you know, it's like there's a barrage of information. Do they really care? They just want to be associated with the cool thing.
Well, yeah, and to suggest that an audience can't conceptually grasp can do this, and it doesn't need to be the same as that,
right?
Because they can do that, you know, it is nonsense. So that's kind of the way I see it going.
Okay, just real quick before we get deeper into these regulations, as we're speaking globally, which I love. As a racing purist, because a lot of people are like, "Fuck these regulations. These regulations suck," and I'm like, well, wait, hold on. If we're talking about purity, I mean, I don't think the last regulations were so pure. I mean, these guys couldn't pass each other. They needed to open their little flaps to even have a chance, right? And once you got, you know, and there's a lot of things like say there's a lot of people that were saying it's antithetical to racing, right? Like these rules are antithetical to racing. I'm like, well, I think it's pretty antithetical to racing that it's almost impossible to pass for the lead, because once you are in the lead, you have clean air and you're just the most important position is impossible to race for. I think that's pretty antithetical to racing. You know, what's funny is like you watch IndyCar, right? You know, the Indy 500, sometimes you don't want to be in the lead, right? Because you're taking all that air for people. So, and that's an exciting element. It's like, do you want to take the lead at the last lap, second lap? It's thrilling. Now, I guess my question for you is, as someone who's watched for a lot longer, was there a platonic ideal? Because I've watched some old races. I'm like, this is boring as shit. So what is the platonic ideal for F1 that these purists are hearkening back to?
So, you know, balance of performance, equivalence of technology, DRS, boost modes in touring cars, overboost mode, push to pass. Right. That there has been these modes began that kind of racing has its genesis in the moment when we could build a car which was too fast to race, basically, right? So you go back into the history of motorsport, you know, to the early days of the Formula One World Championship, and you're literally having a sequence of cars. You know, you were talking pre-downforce, right? You've got a group of cars that are the fastest cars that those manufacturers can literally produce, and those cars are, you know, that in some way is pure racing, but we know too much. Is the reality of it. To go back to that, and I agree with you. You know, that there'll always be some level of, now, if you want cars to overtake each other and you want to have an exciting race. I mean, I did a season of sports car racing in IMSA. Everybody knew we used to do our strategy by a caution in the last 5 laps. Everybody knew they would find a reason. A squirrel would walk too close to the track. They would throw a caution in the last 5 laps because they wanted a finish for Instagram, right? With 2 cars going side by side after 6 hours of racing. You could set your watch by it, you know? NASCAR races in stages for that reason. So
right,
we got to accept that if we want that kind of action, there's going to be an element of, you know, let's just put them all back together and give them some tools to race with. I think what people are struggling with here is firstly messaging around, like, we don't have the tools yet because nobody really knew what these cars were going to look like on the track racing each other till they raced each other for the first time. We don't really have the tools, and and I mean the graphics and what the audience need to know on the side of the cars. It's a big part of it too, right? So there'll be, I think, development in how we explain this stuff, and that's our job. People don't like that. They're not on the limit of grip the whole time, and I get that. And I think that's what people say when they feel the cars are anti-racing or the antithesis of racing. And also there's this concept where I think Charles Leclerc raised it in Suzuka, where if you go faster in the corners as a driver, you're then on throttle earlier, you then lose out on the next straight, which is difficult to get their head around. But I've seen too much racing, and I just don't feel like it's my job. Well, not fair to say. Like, I don't think it helps in the scenario to just throw your hands up and say it sucks. There's going to be a group of changes, and I think that there is a formula which is entertaining with this set of regulations as a baseline. Do I think that this is it in its final form? Would they be having meetings if it was?
Okay, let's talk about the meeting. Let's talk about what's on the table for them to change. Seems like there's kind of 6 things here. There's cutting the battery energy recovery per lap from 9 megajoules currently to 6. This would slow the cars down, but essentially it would be easier to recharge the battery. You wouldn't have to do as much super clipping. You could recharge, in the previous regs, you could recharge the battery in 1 or 2 corners, because that wasn't that much to recharge. That's one of the things. Reducing the MGUK power ceiling from 350 to 200 kilowatts. Adjusting the super clipping harvesting from 250 to 360 to reduce speed differential. Spread the battery power across the whole straight instead of using it all at once. This would avoid a power drop off at the end of straights. Rethinking active aero so that it would be open for basically more of the lap, and the driver would be in more control, and simplifying confusing rules that can penalize drivers for deploying energy at the wrong time. Of those kind of 6 things, what kind of jumps out at you as kind of being the most important?
I think that the most obvious solution is to reduce the peak energetic power, right? So that's point one, because so then you have cars that go flat out from the beginning of the straight to the end of the straight, and they're spreading that energy across the straight for longer, because definitely for qualifying, right? Because that's what's going to give you your all the power or your limit of grip qualifying. If you reduce the amount of power that they're allowed to recharge, you won't get super clipping. So what they do at the moment is they reduce the for qualifying, they already do this. They reduce the amount, they did it in Suzuka, reduce the amount of power that you can recover over a lap.
Yeah.
And what they're trying to do there is make the teams bias the most effective methods of recharging, which is on the brakes, and prevent that extreme super clip to gather energy for the next straight, because all the speed is at the bottom, all the speed is in acceleration, and all the potential energy is at the top. So you do that super clip, and then you deliver that power in the next straight, which is effective if you've got lots of energy to play with per lap, but doesn't look nice to the viewer, and also makes the cars go super slowly at the end of the straights, right? But definitely for qualifying, I think the energetic the reduction in total energy would be the one which would give you your flat out qualifying. There are 2 potential holdups on any of these regulation changes. The first is what has been agreed with the manufacturers and stakeholders. For example, has it been totally agreed that we will be 50-50 internal combustion engine to energetic power, right? At which point you can't reduce that power output, because then you're not in 50-50, right?
Right.
So, and the second holdup will be, how about the teams who are currently performing and like the regulations? So if you start to allow, for example, the teams to recover less energy per lap, the teams that are very efficient in recovering that energy would say, hey, we produced a car to the regulations. You asked us to produce a car to the regulations. We did a great job of it. Why are we being penalized now after 3 races? So those two things, I think, are going to be the key, moreover than which one is actually correct. And by the way, it's going to be a combination of measures as well. That they put in place. Those two things are going to define. So what I believe now the FIA need to do is chart a path between those things that allow those agreements to be satisfied, the competitors to be satisfied that they have not developed cars essentially in vain, or that they're not being disadvantaged in the competitive order, or indeed convince them that the good of the sport requires the change irrespective of that, and then enforce the change which give the intended result.
What you're saying sounds impossible, though, right? It sounds impossible. So whoever are making these rules are caught between the big manufacturers who are like, I want it 50-50. That's what I want. And then Toto Wolff, who says, these regulations are perfect. You're going to take away my advantage. Like, how are you going to thread that fucking needle? Do you think that it's going to be a tough needle to thread, or do you think they're going to be able to figure it out?
But you've raised the end. You've raised the end point. We've raised the end point, and it's going to be the point which comes up in every single meeting, which is safety, viewer, right? And that's the end of, that's the be all and end all of the discussion. So the discussions might be quite long over what eventually gets changed and adjusted, but we'll have to come to a resolution, because at the end of the day, the 2 points on which all stakeholders in the full sport are entirely aligned is the racing must be safe and the viewers must enjoy it. So, you look at the metrics, and I think it's going to be a decision of, eventually it will be a decision of pure necessity to make sure that we've met all of those criteria.
There's a lot of ink being spilled about the drivers kind of implying that they will not be listened to, or being flat out saying it. I think Lando Norris has said it. Lewis has even, talked about it, that in terms of in this meeting of the, all the big power players coming in, you would hope, and certainly from the fans' perspective, you would hope that the drivers have a real say in this discussion. Do you believe that is the case? And if not, what can the drivers do? I mean, they have a union, right? There's the GPDA. What can the drivers do to make sure that when these type of things come up, that they have kind of that union power, that they have the ability to affect the change that they would like to?
Well, the first thing that I would say is, whenever the sport as a whole has not listened to the drivers as a group, it's gone very badly. When you look into the history of Formula One, when you look into, for example, all Jackie Stewart's work on safety and all of those associated points, if you listen to the guys in the car, then they'll tell you how it really is. I mean, the GPDA is the touch point. The drivers need to also reciprocate that courtesy, though, and not speak on party lines, basically, and that's the important code of trust, I think, between the regulation builders and the drivers as a group, which is and I think that the sport in this moment needs to be capable of all coming together and going, right, okay, this has its merit, but is not quite right. We all now need a very big, honest conversation about how we make the sport like as good as we know it can be, and also fulfill what the stakeholders want it to be. One of those groups of stakeholders is the drivers. And when if and when the drivers come in and say these closing speeds are too big, that is pretty near the top of the list, isn't it? Of the group of things that need to be considered, and it sounds like they're doing that. So,
but actually, I guess if it seems like, I'm curious your thoughts on this. From my perspective, as I look at this and I kind of see the macro powers at play here, when I give giving the drivers the benefit of the doubt, it seems like they have felt like they have not been listened to. So the only manner in which only power that they have is to kind of speak out in the press, because they're not being listened to behind the scenes. And so I guess when I hear you say like they need to, like not speak out of the party lines or, that kind of thing, I guess in my brain, I think, well, if they were maybe felt heard behind the scenes, they wouldn't be mouthing off as much in public. Do you think that that's part of what's at play here?
Yeah. I mean, it's always hard to say what's going on behind the scenes, right? I think that when you hear drivers speak out directly in public and in the media, it's either one of two things. Either they feel extremely strongly about something, or the team have their directives on
right.
what they as a group feel about that thing. But remember, these guys are all sort of employees of the team as well. They have exactly the same problem as any other contracted employee does about liking or not liking the direction in which their business and their industry as a whole is going. So that's the scenario. But what I think you're seeing though is a couple of those key drivers who are coming sort of to the more towards the end of their careers, but have seen eras of Formula One. You see Lewis, you see Fernando. Those guys find themselves sort of as representatives of the driver's voice as well, because in some way they've got a little bit less to lose because they've seen it, been there, done it. They're moving towards that end of their career, and they can speak with great knowledge and great history and great results as well. So now you go and stand there as somebody like, for example, Arvid Lindblad or Liam Lawson, right. And those guys are going to rely on the big names to go and say what the drivers as a group are thinking, which is why the GPDA is a great thing for those, particularly for those young drivers.
Okay, speaking of a drivers' union, I was hoping, as an American who's watched lockouts before, who's seen very tense collective bargaining agreements between the NFL and then and the NFL players, NBA, NHL. I remember there was the half the season went by, there was no action. Is this union a fucking real union? Or is this like a bullshit union?
It wouldn't be the first time the Formula One drivers as a group have refused to race.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right, but it's been a minute,
It
right?
didn't last. I don't think it lasted very long.
Yeah.
Racing drivers are sort of like inherently individuals. I don't know if you've noticed this.
Yes.
Again. Not to downplay the competitiveness of something like the NFL, because I'm sure it's unbelievably wildly competitive to get yourself in a team, but you're talking from a extremely layman's knowledge, 50 guys per team, multiple teams in a league. Not only have you got like a bigger group of people to sort of pull the leash, but also, there are maybe, we're talking thousands and thousands of people who want to be Formula One drivers, and there are 22 of them. And they're all standing there with their reserve drivers standing in the back of the garage as well. I mean, it's pretty abundantly clear, and clear in contract as well, I would have thought, for at least half of the grid, that they are replaceable on the spot. Motorsport doesn't have, I mean, for all of its wrongs and its problems, motorsport has nothing like the FA, right? we are freely contracted men on the land and women on the land. We are, we do what the document says. So it's you don't have, unless you are monumentally successful, and I'm talking Lewis, Max, Charles, you don't have a huge amount of sway as a racing driver, again, beyond as you say, the reality that tons and tons and millions of people follow you, and the world of social media allows you to say what you think.
I make you king of F1, in charge of everything, dictator for life. What do you, you can change the regulations tomorrow, not these little tweaks, anything you want them to be for 2027. What are you doing?
I have sustainably fueled V10 engines with, a dinky wheelbase. We go back to maybe early 700s of kilos. I think, and then maybe depending on maybe a kind of KERS system or a push to pass with all of the technology that we have now to allow the cars to follow closely, really tight boxes around all of the anti-follow, the anti outwash tech that all of the cars have now, which, by the way, I actually think is pretty good on the most recent set of cars. I mean, there's a lot to be said about them. Right. They are following. So that's what I do. Whether I would have then, a very, very early Monday morning meeting with no coffee and no sugar with the boss of 6 original equipment manufacturers who all fired me on the spot. I don't know, but I'd have a crack at it. Oh man, F1 under me would be just a Fleetwood Mac fueled, would be like a Fleetwood Mac fueled, engine fest, of course. But then, we are petrol heads. That's why we're here. People flick this on a Sunday afternoon. They watch the first 30 minutes. If 6 cars don't overtake each other in the first 6 laps, they flick it off again. I'll be at a racetrack this weekend. I'll be at a racetrack next weekend, the one after that. So, this is how I've been raised, dude, and I think that engagement with the wider world is kind of a little bit of a painful process for us motorsport types. We sit in the boardrooms and we don't necessarily always understand why the powers that be want the things they do, but we just try and deliver, because at the end of the day, just as every 15-year-old who's trying to race a Formula Ford knows, sponsorship is king in the world of racing.
Has this? I want to get to the positive in a second, but I want to go just one more big negative here. Formula One's at this, it's at this interesting point in its tenure, right? It's as big as it ever has been. We just did this huge deal with Apple TV. I'm seeing your mug on Apple TV. I got to scroll to find Sky Sports, baby. When I turn on Apple TV, it's you guys. It's F1 TV right away. It's really trying to get this foothold in America. It's this whole thing, and I cannot understate that what this whole thing feels like it adds up to be is a colossal fucking failure on the part of Formula One, because all anyone can talk about this year are these engine regs and how the drivers aren't happy, and no one's talking about the racing. No one right now cares that Kimi Antonelli is beating George Russell in the standings. All anyone can talk about or focus on is these regs. I mean, it just feels like such a massive miscalculation as to what they thought was going to happen.
Yeah, I know, dude. I'm here to help. That's what I do. I'm here to try and help explain what is going on, and and focus on trying to help people understand what and it's I get to sort of a certain point where I'm at the end of my remit on explaining this stuff. But we can do a better job of explaining it. And like honestly, that's what I'm focused on, right? That's what I'm focused on. I love motorsport. I think and feel and hope and believe that in this gap, then there will be a marked improvement of the the show, of the way that the racing is working, and it becomes more entertaining and more interesting, and that we can focus on a championship battle through the rest of the season. But I am a motorsport guy, so whatever it is, I turn up and I just put my shoulder behind the wagon and I'm going to explain to you what's happening. And then it's up to you guys if you like it or you don't like it.
Okay, can you tell us what you have liked about these? Because I'll be Matt and I, we've watched some of these first few races. I mean, we were told it was going to be just horrible. You're not even going to be able to watch it. And there's been some stuff in there that we have not hated. Now, Saturday, that's a different story. I think there's a pretty clear consensus that people aren't loving what's happening on Saturday. But in terms of what you've seen, what have you found interesting? What are the positives that you've seen from the racing so far?
I do enjoy the wheel to wheel racing, and there is definitely an art to it. Like even when you talk to the drivers, after the races, particularly like when we had them on after Melbourne, a couple of guys said, I learned so much about how to do this wheel to wheel. And we've had a couple of moments where Charles and Lewis have been battling with each other, and Charles comes over the radio and goes, okay, actually, this is pretty fun. There are several times throughout the year we've seen, for example, Kimi Antonelli have to work his racecraft out to try and make moves through the field. So like, I don't hate the racing product from beside the racetrack. I think it's fun to watch. And I think there's something in there on a boost button kind of electrified technology. You've run out of energy. He's come back at you. If it's well explained and we can understand who has energy and who doesn't have energy in each particular moment, I think there's something in that as a racing product. But yeah, the qualifying stuff I don't love as a spectacle, just purely because I want to see the cars on the limit of grip.
Okay. This season, let's get specific. You think Kimi has a chance at this? You think George is scared? What do we think of this championship battle? Let's actually talk about the actual people here.
I think Kimi has a shot, yes. What I threw it back to in Suzuka was a little moment that I saw in the sprint race in China, where Kimi didn't get off to the best start. I think it was Isaac Hadjar. He had a little scuffle with very early on in the race. With these regs, and especially in the Mercedes, early on in this year, the bad start, 1 in every 5, is going to be built in, right? And I think it's whichever one of those two Mercedes guys handles that moment where they go backwards 3 rows off the line. Mm-hmm. I actually think throughout the year so far, Kimi has looked the slightly quicker of the two, just lap on lap. I mean, the stint he put in at the end of Suzuka was unbelievable, albeit George is in traffic, but he looked quicker through practice. He looked quicker in qualifying, and then he looked quicker in the race in Suzuka for me. So I think that is it. It's Kimi's moment where he doesn't have a little. Where he doesn't lose his head in traffic. Each time he does that, he moves himself one step quicker, one step closer to the championship. It's a different dynamic between those two because, for example, when Piastri came into McLaren, Norris was the incumbent, right? And you felt like Norris had an advantage because he was the incumbent driver at McLaren. even though, George has tenure at Mercedes, Kimi is so well supported by the team from so young that they have parity in that team, even though Kimi's, much the junior, much the less experienced. So yeah, I really think it's a championship battle between those two, and I think Toto is going to let them race clearly. So.
Alex Brundle just clip that saying, implying Alex Brundle is implying that Oscar did not have parity with Lando Norris. Let's just he basically said that.
Let the record show.
Let the record show that. Aggregators, clip that. That's the headline of the entire episode. It's been nice having you. Been nice having you, Alex.
On this episode of Things I Didn't Say.
But speaking of McLaren, they look like they took a step forward.
Those practice starts, man.
Yeah, the practice starts.
That's right. You saw it.
Zach Brown allowed Oscar to, he let Lando get a lead, and then he allowed Oscar to finally start a race.
Come on.
That's right.
And he, we got this break coming up. Do you think we're going to see any surprises? Given that there's going to be this. Well, I don't think the engine reform is happening till June. When is it happening? No, but anyway,
yeah.
When we
1st.
come back in May, do we think there's going to be a reshuffling or at least a tightening? What do we think?
Yeah, I do. So Suzuka flatters McLaren because they have rear stability. It's really. Funnily enough, putting rear stability into the car was in the last era what really made that McLaren spectacular. Appears to have carried across into this era, and having those like sweepers in the early stages of the lap is what really made the McLaren strong there. But I think they have managed to drag more information out of HPP to get kind of close to parity on the efficiency with Mercedes. They'll number crunch again in the break. And then what happens now is, so with these cars, they're really multifaceted. So, and everything has to work together. So there's amount of energy that they're delivering on a strategy. And then of course, because that affects the straight line speed so much, you then have to work your downforce level back from there, including the straight and the corner mode. So what the teams will be able to do now is take the data from the first 3 races and match everything up. The power, the chassis, the aero, which should bring everyone closer. That'll be the first stage. Second stage is where they bring in this additional development and upgrade opportunities regulation, which I keep on blanking on and I cannot say on air to save my life. It is the longest sentence in the entire world. So when they bring those in, at the moment the manufacturers think everyone but Mercedes will get another power unit upgrade. So that comes in after 6 races. Obviously, we've lost 2. So one of the outcomes of this meeting as well, I think, will be whether that provision comes in after the full 6 races, excluding, or at the point that would have been 6 races, including the 2 we lost, the 2 that should that would have happened in April. And then 1st of June, the compression ratio change happens. So that'll be another stage. So I think we'll have progressive tightening of the field through the year, but definitely the first one is going to happen in Miami.
Do you think McLaren's going to catch Ferrari at the very least?
I think McLaren have caught Ferrari. Yeah. I think that, there's after they get the Merc power unit working, for Miami, I don't see a reason why the McLaren Ferrari battle is not going to be as it was in Suzuka now for the races ongoing.
Damn. Okay, what the fuck happened to Williams?
Well, it's really weird because the car's just overweight.
But a lot of cars are the Red Bull's overweight, right? McLaren. I mean, there are other cars that are overweight.
Yeah, I think nothing. When you talk to Albon, nothing's come together, and it's a bit like what I was saying a minute ago, where basically, if you've not got the chassis right, then you've not got the aero right. Then bear in mind, like all of these teams, and I think Alpine have done a really good job of it. McLaren have obviously done a good job of it. One of the key advantages for Mercedes is, the engine dimensions, its power output, exactly how it's going to fit under the skin of the car. So you can start on everything else way, way earlier than anyone you're supplying the engine to as a customer. Williams and so on, and and Alpine and McLaren have to go get their Mercedes engine, or probably the specs of their Mercedes engine, and start from there, right? Which is where, as the OEM, as the original equipment manufacturer, you have such an advantage at the beginning of the regulation set because of that. And I think Williams have just come off worse badly. They've also have this. So Alex Albon said they have this three-wheeling issue, which I believe they brought a geometry fix to try and cure at the beginning of the year, which is something I've driven me some race cars, and I'd never heard of that in my life. So it's obviously a bit of a bizarre chassis to get their head around.
By three-wheeling issue, you mean like on corners, they're like one of the wheels is coming off the road?
Yeah, so the inside front wheel is, so you have the geometry of your two tires at the front, and as you turn, there's an element of lifting as the car applies load to the outside front, and if it picks the inside wheel all the way off the floor, then you don't get that inside wheel contributing to the turning. But it's like that's like
in go-karting, right? Yeah, go-kart. Yeah. I was gonna say that's like what happens with go-karting. James Vowles has been talking about 2026 for as long as I can remember. This guy, it feels like he came out of the womb, and he said, in 2026 we will be incredible. And here we are. It's 2026, and this is the situation. I don't know. Does something need to happen there? Is this it? Is he on? Here's the question. Is he on like thin ice right now?
You guys are very spicy this evening. It's Alex,
we're finally getting into the racing. We finally get to talk about
what. Alex, disown your father. Yes or no? Yes or yes?
We've had father wrong, yes or no. Regulations wrong, yes or no. Vowels out, yes or no. It's red flags.
It's red flags, baby.
I tell you what.
Is he on thin ice? Is he on thin ice? Are people? Does he have to worry about his future?
Will be for Doralton Capital to decide. But they have been. I remember sitting across from. So they were literally, off the top of my head, so two things and two reasons why it really isn't good, right? Firstly, I remember sitting across from Alex Albon in Barcelona last year, right, which was round 9 of the championship, and going, you're already focused on 2026. Are you not worried that it's going to cost you performance through the rest of the year? And he went, no, but I'm really looking forward to 2026. They were literally the first, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Second, we heard at length at the beginning of last year about, all of the new systems they put in place, how they're now itemizing all of their parts, and how the grand efficiency had been
he was all saying, oh, Claire Williams, it was a shithole when I got here. I needed to spruce this place up. Right. I
remember to clear out the break room, and exactly. And then the beginning of this year was literally exactly that issue, which is not great at all. So I mean, it's results are results, right? The management structure of that team, if it's occurred on us, it's definitely occurred on them, that promises were made and the car's really not good.
Well,
Okay,
how did they
speaking of
get fifth without caring? And then now they're fucking, they suck and they put all their effort in.
It's something I really would like. And it's something as well that actually, happened a little bit with Red Bull through the end of last year as well. Right. It's utterly bizarre. And it just shows you actually F1 teams, they're bringing these upgrades all the time. Most recent example, Red Bull Suzuka, brilliant new side pod, brilliant new floor, still struggling with the same stuff as Shanghai.
Right.
Sometimes you arrive with a car that you know and understand and fettle it to the best possible performance and actually gain more. There were several teams at the beginning of last year which turned up with the same chassis as they had done in the previous year and hadn't made a huge amount of development. Ballistic in testing, ballistic in the first couple of races. Sometimes the devil is better than trying to get too smart about it. And I wonder if that's the case.
It's also like it's also like when a guy loses an end plate and he goes faster, and you're just like, do these people know anything? Do these people have any idea what they're doing?
I put this question actually to somebody about the end of Q3 because I noticed a trait. I'm sure it won't mind me saying it was Mark Webber actually. And I was, because he's obviously at the time was in the garage with Oscar Piastri more and more. And I said to Mark, why do I can't work it out. You've got these guys building through to the end of Q3, and so often in the Q3 sessions,
they're slower.
That final run is slower.
Yeah.
Is there a reason for it? Is there like a, and I'm there, I've got my tech pad ready and I've got my notebook and I'm like, what is the reason, Mark? What is the reason? I want to do a hit on this. And he goes, mate, the guys just push too hard and overthink it right at the end as a group. Once you've done so many laps of a circuit and you've honed it in and you try and take just that little bit more, sometimes you just lose that little bit of fluidity and an understanding for the car. So it plays out on the driver's side as well.
Go slow to go fast. Speaking of just more red flags things, is this the worst start to any Formula One season you ever seen from Aston Martin? Is this the most embarrassing beginning of any season in Formula One?
Oh, from a hype to
it's like new regs, like coming into the new regs and just being like, we can't even race the car. Like, the guys are driving with their elbows. It's like, this is with
it's
all
like
the
me
hype
with my knee as I hold my latte and my phone. Like
the Formula One through its history has seen some pretty there's
some stinkers.
Worst ever start to the season.
But not from a privateer team, not from a Haas or Marussia or like from what's supposed to be a top flight team with its own wind tunnel and shit. Have we ever seen something this bad?
Right.
That's the thing. I mean, it's not Hispania, is it? Right. It's a proper. That being said, right, you got to remember that even though it comes with an OEM name, that is still basically an uprated facility and everything. That is still basically Racing Point that Lawrence Stroll bought, and it's still effectively, but comes with a tremendous facility and everything else. It's not great, is it? And the problem that they've got, so they've got a couple of problems. They've got a couple of really big problems now, actually.
Yeah.
Firstly, they are the only car with the Honda Power Unit. So they don't know, they can't even look at anybody else to work out if that's just a pure engine resonance issue, or it's to do with how the engine is mounted in the chassis. Right? That's problem one. No comparison. Problem two is that in terms of like hellish issues to fix, engine resonance is got to be up there, because it is a vibration in the very heart, like the fundamental connection of a single-seater racing car is how the stressed engine connects to the back of the chassis and through the way that it's mounted, it is like the beating heart. There are the two most difficult parts of a single-seater car to change are the chassis, because everything else bolts to it, and the engine, because it's the most complex bit. So to have a problem with the way the chassis engages with the engine is like just about as big a nightmare as you can get. And the final problem is resonance issues are like neither here nor there. It's like having an electrical problem with a robot. Like you're just digging into like the wire that's frayed could be anywhere.
I hate when I have an electrical problem with my robot. You really brought it home for me there.
And here's mine.
I love the Brundle metaphors. I love them.
Okay.
I'm fucking with you.
It's like having a plumbing problem, and a water pump.
Water pump with the plumbing. There we go.
Yeah, it's like having a plumbing problem with your water pump. It could be anywhere.
Yes.
The things that spin and reciprocate in there. So omni fuck basically of just nightmare.
Yeah. Whose fault is it? Is it Honda's?
Well,
is it Adrian Newey's? Because they're like this. They go like this.
Again, you would have to look into the engine to find out whose fault it is. Honda say it ran fine on the dyno with an acceptable amount of resonance. So they'll obviously have a threshold. Then they've handed it across to Aston Martin, who've put it in the chassis. And obviously the way it connects to the chassis means that resonance gets translated first to the battery, which they appear to have fixed. Second, through the steering column to the driver. You're going to groan at me, but it's like one of those things. It is, but it is one of those things, but it's the sort of thing that on a full chassis rig somewhere probably should have been ironed out. So I think, it probably... It's about 50-50, but I would say both stakeholders. If I was sitting in that car as a driver, I would think both of these stakeholders should have caught this. It's like everybody's fault. It's not a nobody's fault thing. It's an everybody's fault thing.
I don't care. I don't care who started it. You know?
It's more. It's more. I don't care who started it, but you shouldn't have punched your brother, and you shouldn't have punched him back.
Right? Yeah. Exactly.
It's a total issue.
You're all in it together. I mean, this. I feel like everything we've known about Formula One is being flipped on its head this year. I mean, Adrian Newey's in this flashy new role, has the worst car on the grid. GP's leaving Max. Max Verstappen can't get a good start on a Sunday. It's just what's up is down, what's down is up. It's been a crazy year. I guess you're a positive man. And I want you to give our people some hope. What can we look forward to this year? Do we have hope that they will figure this out and we can get back to what we love, which is watching these guys go at it, be at the edge of the limit, and create some drama along the way?
The thing is that I know that this is also a lot of Formula One fans' first ever, Formula One fans who came in a DTS, in a Netflix era of F1. This will be the first obviously they'll look back and they'll know that there have been regulation changes through the eras and look back if they're interested at the old cars and how they worked and everything. This is the first regulation change that they've lived through, right? So although it is, it's pretty extreme, and this is probably the biggest one ever, and stuff is weird. It is always like this to a degree. Not quite to this degree, but it is always like this to a degree. So everything goes up in the air. Formula One minds, and not necessarily always the minds that write the regulations, but the minds that engage with the regulations are brilliant people, right? And I think there's been a tiny little bit of assumption, complacency, maybe, that if you hand that group of individuals literally any regulation set, they are going to create an amazing set of race cars that race each other so closely, because that's what they've always done in the past, right? Because whatever's come through those gates, the engineers of Formula One have generated these just insanely brilliant cars that by the end of the era, you think, 14 to now or whatever, have been, have had tenths of a second between them. And I am pretty steadfast in my belief that with a couple of tweaks, they'll be able to do the same thing. Not only because I think they can, but also because I think they'll have to, because the sport needs them to. And that's what needs to happen. So, that is my hope for the future. My other hope for the future is if you look back at qualifying sessions at the early stages of the turbo hybrid era, they are still not as close as they are now. The some of the qualifying sessions are still not as close as they are now, and that ended up okay. So that is my pill of positivity to your viewership.
So take it and drink water.
You sound convinced.
Swallow it, everybody. Swallow the pill. I just hear the people saying, "Oh, shut the fuck up. This sucks.
Yeah.
You're on the payroll." They think we're on the payroll. I can't even think what they're out here. I don't even want to
defending the regs.
Yeah.
The thing is, right, that I'm here to explain Formula One. I will be, of course, you talk about this stuff. I will be, on the payroll corporate shill, whatever I say, right? Whatever I say. Right. And actually, funnily enough, you get people, comments to me like, I bet you love this because, you're pay on the payroll, blah, blah, blah. And I go, and I will respond to those comments with, actually, no, I don't like that bit very much. And and what's really interesting about the next response is they go, oh, really? Oh, well, we would really like you to just be a bit more of a corporate shill so our algorithm could have a little bit more interest out of complaining about that.
Sure,
you know what I mean? Like, there's a certain amount of noise going on that are people for their own algorithm's sake or their own clout's sake, recognizing that there's a groundswell of opinion and just bandwagon jumping. Anyone could do that. Like, anyone can do that. Like, it takes a little bit of something and a little bit of experience to go, this is how it's working. Like it, don't like it. I'm here to explain it.
Here's a question that I have. We'll let you go in a minute, but in terms of you mentioned earlier, kind of like in terms of the translating of the what's happening on track, which is a large part of what you do. Like, we've seen some graphics of like the battery, right? And the battery's like kind of going down a little bit, but like right now there isn't necessary. And I know these regulations are changing. So like maybe there's like a little bit of like, until these are set, we're not going to invest in it. But I guess my question is like, what is the disconnect right now from like getting the information from the teams and being able to like have it on the screen as we're watching? Because we want context for what's happening on some of these overtakes. We want context with when, now maybe there's going to be a situation where the drivers are in more control of when they have the active arrow opened or not. Like when they're deploying that, when they're not, when this person has to charge battery, when they're not. Is it like is there a difficulty in actually getting the literal information? What's the kind of difficulties in the translation there?
Well, I want it on the car, not on the screen. I would actually, I've driven in series where we have literally like a number panel that shows you how long the pit stop is, where the car is in the race and in class, for example. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it on the race car. And so even like audience beside the racetrack could actually see, I don't see that there's any prevention of doing that. The information is available. it rocks up in terms of graphics. Obviously, all of that. So you've got a rolling machine that is putting out these Grand Prix, right? And there's a certain those people work at pretty much capacity to get each Grand Prix to air. Okay, so then to actually work around, and this is also like not my job. I'm just kind of explaining how it works. The getting a new set of graphics up and running is a weirdly complex job because it all has to be accurate to the millisecond, which means information in.
Right.
It also has to be approved by sort of those stakeholders as they get as the F1 broadcast get that information. So all of that information exists and it's coming. And I think that this little break is going to be a revolution, I hope, for that as well. In terms of offering the audience more of an understanding of what's going on. Also, like and it's something that you come across a lot, like in broadcasting of all motorsport, which is that I obviously would have all battery levels, percentages, throttle, brake, and steering of all cars displayed on screen at all times, so I could review them. Right. Yeah. But then
with the actual footage, just this big,
like in the middle, tiny. Yeah.
Literally, like it would just for me, the screen would just be like 22 data traces.
Yes.
And about 17 laps in, I would just go, "Oh, George won." And walk off, right? And so, like, but not everyone is you, not everyone is me. So there's always that balance as well. By like, how much do you put on screen, where people are just gonna go, oh, the screen's too busy, or whatever. So there's considerations going on all of that. Do they get it right all the time? Like, I think they'd be the first to acknowledge they absolutely don't. Does it get better? Most of the time, yeah, I think it does. Will it get better at a higher rate at the beginning of this season? Yeah, definitely so. Especially now we've got a break.
I got one last question. Well, they could. Well, first of all, they could make the experience more customizable. Where like if you, viewer Alex, wanted to just throw up telemetry traces, they could make it so you could do that. They could, and you could just watch that. Now, my question for you is, what the fuck happened to all the radios? That they're not airing them as much. I've noticed that. Yeah, there's way fewer radios airing. There's
no specific change that I'm aware of with the amount of radio going out.
Okay.
Or anything like that. Again, so all of that. So to give you an insight into how that gets put together. So obviously there's a big there's two sides of Formula One broadcasting. There's a international feed broadcast, which is the one that you'll get for all the broadcasters. They then take that, and that's F1 between the logos, traditional F1, the way that it's always happened. And then F1 TV operates in the same building, but as a broadcaster in many ways. So we would receive that international feed, and then we put our shows around it and our commentary on top of it, and then it goes out. So the radios come with the international feed, rather than us picking which radios we do and we do and don't use. But no, there's not a massive change in there's not an intentional change in the amount of radios that are going out. I don't think
the internet believes it's because the drivers are complaining about the regs and F1 wants to not air that. That's what the internet's saying.
Yeah, I mean maybe. I don't know. Sure. I don't know. Like, yeah. Yeah. I mean,
could be. Who knows?
Could be. I'm happy to be on the payroll as a corporate shill if you want, but I know that I don't know of any difference. I sit next to, for example, all the teams from all of the digital side of F1. And as with all big sort of companies, it all sits behind like a big kind of logo, which makes it really easy to believe there's like this grand conspiracy because there's this like big faceless logo, you know?
Right.
But it's actually quite a small group of people that do the digital stuff. And, you know, I sat with them for a whole weekend in Suzuka, and I don't think there wasn't a grand conspiracy that I noticed, and I was there for quite a long time. So, you know, it's yeah, I mean,
well, hopefully we don't have to be talking about this stuff for too much longer. We can just get it back to the racing. Hopefully this situation is at least somewhat resolved and the Band-Aid can stop the bleeding. That you've given me a bit of hope. I feel more hopeful than I did at the start of this podcast, Alex. So I thank you for that.
Like 10% more or something
I'd say
like that.
I'd say I feel 10 or 15% more hopeful than I did.
Me too.
I'm glad that there's a consensus also on that. The AI I really hope that they like put more of the control in the driver's hands. That like what we love as fans is feeling like they're doing. That's just something that excited us about these regs, was kind of like, oh, the movable arrow, the power deployment. These are more tools for these guys to play with. This is like more. And then when you hear it's automated and Lando Norris is like, I didn't even want to overtake, but the car just like was driving faster, so all of a sudden I had to overtake. You know, that I really think kind of goes that hurts your soul a bit. So. But what I've seen stuff that I like on track. So hopefully by Miami, they'll have figured some of this stuff out and we can never talk about this shit again. That's my hope.
I think so. That'll be the measure of it, won't it?
Yeah.
That'll be the measure of it. That like all of a sudden the focus moves to who's actually delivering on track. That's our focus anyway. But I understand. We're not as a group of broadcasters. If the audience want to understand what we all think about the regulations, then that's what we have to cover. But I think the measurement of it will be, it's Mercedes versus Ferrari, or it's Ferrari versus McLaren, or can they get that Aston off the ground? And that's what I really hope for, because I love motorsport and I love F1, and I want to see a regulation set that doesn't switch the audience off, because this stuff is worth keeping, worth retaining, worth funding, worth loving. And I think that's everybody is aligned on that. So that's where we stand.
Love it. Matt, how do you feel?
I feel better, but I couldn't have felt worse before. So I think, so it's not really saying much that he made me feel better, because I couldn't have felt
And Alex,
worse,
how do you feel?
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel searched. I'll be honest.
We kind of held you. We kind of like get you empty your pockets, and kind of thing.
I feel searched, but that's what I'm happy with what I think about things. It's all good.
Love it.
You're an exploitable resource. You're happy to be exploited.
Was this a podcast or a robbery? We thank you so much for coming on the pod again. Could you honor us with a goodbye, Vankas?
Goodbye, Vankers.
Yes, goodbye, Vankas. Thank you.
Goodbye, Vankas. Oh, what a fun interview that was. And you know what? This interview and this podcast would not be possible if it wasn't for our daddies of the pod. So we got to thank them. We got to thank Kayla, Robin, Jordan Texera, Jay Lingle, Spencer Grieve, Javier, Sheila Valeri, Chandler, Ali Santana, Carla Juarlo, Kimberly Huelen, Alonso, My Face 69, Donya Denad, Deadbeat Daddy Muhammad, Jimmy, Kimmy, sponsored by Mommy of the Pod, Hollister 584, Delusional Science Fan, Kat, Future Dog Tour Dion, Steph Grossi, Laura, Emily Gillenwater, Cody Hull is my F1 daddy, Branch W, Keep Keep up the signs hate. Hunter Scruggs, Salmonella Mozzarella. I'm a Leclerc fan, and yes, it hurts. Jerry Kess, George Russell is evil Peter Parker from Spider-Man 3. Matt Edwards is always right. I wish I was Max and Danny's love child. Delaney Andrews, Henry Caskey, Miles Lewis, Alexander, Maggie B, Kaylee Breyer, Eve the Y, Devin, aka the Victor Dr. Sullivan's PA, Courtney Fraser, Yuki Sonoda's other mother. Jenny is the reason I'm a daddy. Megan, Aaron, Pineapple the Y. Matt has a secret order for Carlos Sainz. Unfortunately, it's Gary. Carolina. My name is AJ, and fuck the HOA. K-Mac can fuck smash my door any day. The official F1 race program and its executive editor, Sarah. I got tickled by the Tifosi. Hey, Jet, good luck out there. Allison Sane, Zhuge, F1 Dude Company, Trent Slickman, Codebound Sonoda, Jerome Ferreira, Colapinto is a fraud, Aaron, Shawhead Jeans Rocks, or Chohan, Catalick my balls, Dave Freer, Charles Leclerc, Truth Bringer, Mama Burns, Arthur Leclerc is hotter, Carlos Sainz, OP Goblin, right? Meow. James, DNCTT, Finney, Daddy Kev, not Magnuson, Mr. Ed, Bobby, Landon Norris's unofficial girlfriend. Why do I always hawk two on this name, Winkin? Lizzie Y, Jafar from afar, Stroll, Pay the Troll Toll to get in the boys' hole, Andrew Prisco, Rojo, the Bambino, the great Paul Bino, and Sausage Boy Atticus. Honorary Daddy of the Pod this week, every week, Nicole Piastri. We have an amazing episode with our immediate reaction to the GP news. If you want to hear the more unhinged reaction to what's going on over at Red Bull, hop over to patreon.com/TRF Pod, and you can sign up for $5 a month, $10 a month, or you can become a daddy for $50 if you want to join the resistance. We love you, Venkas.
Damn, I'm a boss. I'm a red flag